WTIM.
Welcome into the WTIM Morning Show, our final segment of the morning, this time with Valerie Belusco, Community and Economic Development Educator with the University of Illinois Extension. Thanks so much to our live stream sponsors, People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, and Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Valerie. Always better with Landmark. Valerie, how are you doing today?
I am doing good.
Thanks so much for being here with us. Our topic today, an interesting one, all about employee burnout. Now, I think all employees out there could be susceptible to burnout, but specifically some areas out there, they're just, it's just a little bit more maybe valid. So to take us through just a little bit of the overview of today, what we're going to be talking about.
So I participated in a mental health summit that was held in Montgomery County on Monday. And some of our speakers that we had included like the head of an ER, the head of a ambulance district, a former police officer, I can't even just several others, all kind of working in EMA and policing. And one of the things they talked about was burnout that happens in their careers and why their careers are in such high demand. And so I wanted to focus today just talking about what is burnout, how we can prevent burnout personally, and how managers can help prevent burnout. And then, does that mean that we should be scared of jobs that might have burnout? So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting topic here and one that definitely needs some attention out there. But so let's get right into it here. The list that you provided me are emergency room, ambulance, and emergency management workers, police, social workers, all of these very susceptible to burnout. Let's get into a little bit of the numbers before we go here. What are the statistics telling us?
Well, there was a great study that had been done in actually just early this year, 2024, and it was published in a medical journal. And they interviewed 686 EMS clinicians. And overall, what they found out was 57% were likely to have burnout. Then they kind of broke things down to see, if somebody would have different types of burnout. And one thing that they learned was almost 75% were likely to suffer from compassion fatigue or some kind of trauma. And so those were really interesting numbers. And when we think about, what the stressors that these jobs have on a day-to-day basis, we can kind of understand why maybe someone would start to have compassion fatigue in that position.
I initially kind of figured that it would be 50-50, that this burnout would be coming from the crazy hours that a lot of these personnel keep. And then, of course, that compassion fatigue, which I've never heard of, trauma, and all the things that come with these jobs, which they just see daily. Normal people, people in my spot, are not seeing the types of situations that other people are in every day. So it's really 75% of people are really, that's the cause of this burnout.
Right. And, if you think about every day you're seeing someone either abusing drugs or, just struggling with life. And so you see that every day, and you might see, you might meet throughout a day 20 different people, and they're all struggling with that.
Yeah. And you think
they're all struggling with some kind of mental health issue. And then all of a sudden, what you start to realize that your heart becomes hardened. And I don't mean that from like a health kind of perspective, but you become kind of tolerant to what you're seeing, and you start to think that you start to respond differently, so with a little less compassion. And so that can be important to notice within yourself if you're in those jobs.
Totally desensitizes you to that kind of things. I think of police, and I think of ambulance workers, they're first responders. They're seeing people most times on their worst days. That can't be good for every interaction you have, for people to be frantic and oftentimes dealing with something that they didn't think they were going to experience that day. I mean, how much does that work into this burnout?
Oh, 100%. I mean, we all have our personal lives that also kind of interfere with everything else in our work lives. And so those kind of just build off of each other and can cause burnout in many different ways, and just cause frustration that can lead to burnout.
Sure. So what are some of the more contributing factors to this overall burnout here?
So some of it really is just the job,
Yeah.
the type of job that it is. So we gave several examples of those. But everyone can have workplace burnout. There is no job that is not susceptible to this. And so when we think about it from a manager's perspective, we don't want workplace burnout because that means we're going to have more turnover. We're going to have workers who were initially incredibly engaged and active and responsive, go getters, kind of start to maybe get a little bit slower in
Yeah.
response or less, might not work together as a team very well. Those kind of, we'll start to see little breakdowns. And so we have to be aware of that. We have to be cognizant of that. And we have to understand that there are so many factors that come into play. It could be the clients we're working with, it could be something in their personal lives. But you know what? It could also be management themselves.
Sure.
And so that's hard to admit,
Yeah.
but it can be. So
In research that you have read there, and those were all really great points, have wages ever been a reason for burnout? Has that ever been a reason that people have lost that go-getter attitude and not an increase in wages? Has that ever been seen?
100%.
Wow. Wow.
Sometimes we see it just because in low paying jobs you feel like you're constantly running on that wheel
Yeah.
and never like catching up or moving ahead. And so that can be very frustrating and that can just cause burnout in those kind of positions. But you can also see it in positions where, let's take teachers for
Sure.
example. Um, Teachers are not the highest paid.
Right.
They have a lot of responsibilities.
Yep.
Those responsibilities are changing day to day, year to year. We just had some new policies that I know are going to be changing for Illinois this year, and how they do some testing. And we were doing the SATs, and now we're going to go back to the ACTs,
Oh
and
gosh.
all of those changes. And so, that puts extra levels of frustration on teachers. And when they're not getting even a true cost of living wage increase, much less anything else, it can be very hard to want to continue to constantly do your best and
Yeah.
constantly work for the kids and constantly, just strive to be better, because sometimes you feel like you're not appreciated.
Mm.
And sometimes you just need a thank you.
Mhm.
Sometimes you also need cold hard cash.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And you mentioned teaching, which is like the best example you could have brought up right there. Kind of reminded me of policing. It's another group of people that are expected to act and serve safely every single day while they are experiencing constant changes. Talk to me about policing in 2024. What were some of those conversations like amongst police officers? Because I know things change in departments, especially here locally. Things have been changing.
Well, so the former police officer that spoke, he talked about specifically how those with mental health challenges kind of um, take up a lot of time
Yeah.
for police officers. Most of the time it comes down to they need somebody to talk to them, they need somebody to listen, they need somebody to be on their side. They might be going through something very traumatic themselves. He gave an example of working with a schizophrenic that he often had calls to. And the schizophrenic was just having a bad day, and he was able to help that person kind of out of that issue. They thought they were seeing aliens, and he just did this by talking to them and kind of helping them through the situation. And sometimes that works. Sometimes that's all you need to do. Sometimes you have to do more than that, and sometimes you have to call in additional medical professionals to help with that. But it's understanding that even if you've been to that person's house a million times, you never know what they've experienced that day. You never know what's happened to them. You never know what they're going through. You never know what might be setting off a new episode. So you never want to go in there with a judgment that you're not going to be able to help them.
Sure.
Because you know what? Sometimes you are. And so going in with a preconceived notion that you can't kind of already puts that in a mindset. And so you want to just know that every day is different, every call is different, even if it's the same person. And he really spoke to that. As someone who has retired from policing when he was younger, he said he never gave that much thought. But the more he got into his position, the older he got in the position, the more he grew in the position, the more he realized how important that was.
Wow. And it really speaks to the burnout of it all. That officer that you got to speak to that day, that was a privilege right there. And more officers like that are rising to the top. But you have to think to yourself about all of the procedures that police go through when responding to any normal call like that. And then, of course, and then all of a sudden you have a schizophrenic man in handcuffs. It just takes a different level that sometimes police maybe aren't have been trained for, and they're also just thinking about their safety. So I mean, all of that is leading towards just tough days at the job. But do you see the trend kind of moving in that direction where we could have a social worker responding to these type of situations?
Well, so I know in Montgomery County, they actually just were awarded a grant to have an officer specially trained for and I'm probably going to say this wrong, but it is to handle
Yeah.
kind of like social work issues like that.
Yeah.
And so that is wonderful. So I think that's one of the things communities can do and be very proactive in. And even though it's just one officer that's trained, that doesn't mean that one officer can't take the knowledge that they've received and help, the other staff kind of learn from them. So
Sure.
they learn how to approach different situations just to stay safe themselves, but to also make sure the public and the person going through a mental health crisis is safe themselves.
Totally. We just had our Taylorville police chief talk to us about mental health reports and calls coming in just a little bit more frequently these days. So I'm glad the conversation's being had at least, and I'm really glad that the training is being pushed out there in a couple of counties. So this is Valerie Bolesko, community and economic development educator for the University of Illinois Extension. You've been listening to the WTIM morning show. Much more from Valerie when we come back.
Your information station, WTIM.
Let's check the markets now on the RFD Radio Network. I'm Jim Taylor. Corn steady, beans mostly lower, wheat trading lower. September corn up half a penny, 383 3/4. December corn up 3/4, 401 1/2. March corn 418 3/4, up 3/4. August beans up 310.23 1/4. September beans down 9 3/4, under $10 now, 995 1/2. November beans 1011 1/4. Down 7 1/2. September wheat down 4 1/4, 534. December wheat down 3 1/4, 558 3/4. August bean meal 336 even, down 480. August bean oil up 8 cents, 42.33. Livestock market August feeders 242.70, up 7 cents. August live cattle 182.17, down a dime. August lean hogs down 55 cents, 90.05. Energy market September crude oil is down a dime, 75.13. Jim Taylor, RFD Radio Network.
If you're like most people, finding extra money for your savings just doesn't happen. Hi, I'm Kendall Jones at People's Bank and Trust, and we have the solution you've been looking for. Sign up for our Save by Spending Roundup program, and we'll round up your purchases to the next dollar. Then transfer that change to your savings account. It's as easy as shop, enjoy, and save. Start saving for the things you really want with our Save by Spending Roundup program. Call 888-PBT-1954 and let us put you and your savings first. People's Bank and Trust, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
The Christian County Economic Development Corporation is a not-for-profit organization whose mission is to promote the creation and retention of jobs and to increase the economic tax base through the development, establishment, and expansion of commerce and industry in the Christian County area. I'm Matt Hart, CCEDC's new Executive Director. I'm here to work with existing county employers as well as develop relationships towards creating new jobs in our county. Feel free to reach out to me, Matt Hart, by clicking our icon at TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
This is Dwayne Wheeler, the police chief of the city of Taylorville. As a law enforcement officer, I've seen the impact that depression and suicide have on many people. Many times, those contemplating suicide endure considerable suffering and distress, but there is help. If you feel depressed or lonely, there are many resources to help you. You can call a trusted relative, friend, or minister, or call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That is 1-800-273-TALK. All of us are here to help you. Thank you.
To learn more about Rolling Meadows Senior Living in Taylorville and the apartments they have available, click on their icon at TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
Jansen's Heating and Air is the home of Dr. Comfort, focusing on customer care for heating and air conditioning across Central Illinois for some 35 years. Find out their services, specials, and coupons by clicking their icon on TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
Your information station, WTIM.
Welcome back to WTIM, your information station. Second segment time of the WTIM morning show with Valerie Belusco, community and economic development educator with the University of Illinois Extension. We've been talking all about burnout and employee burnout, just in certain fields there, emergency room, ambulance, police, social workers, and learning all of the effects and where we stand with that now. Now with Valerie, how can we avoid burnout in the workplace, especially with these first responder type positions here?
Well, if you're looking from your own personal perspective, there are ways you can personally try to avoid burnout. One of the ways is to seek help. And I know it is not easy to add one more thing into your life, into your schedule, but just having someone to talk to sometimes can do a lot. And sometimes it needs to be someone who is not a coworker or not a spouse. Sometimes it needs to be someone who can listen to you vent, who can counsel you, who can help redirect your focus back to the reason why you went into that position, to help you, go back and think about the real reason why you're in there.
Yeah.
That can be incredibly important. Another thing, encourage regular breaks. Take 10 minutes if you have to, or have work-life balance. Know that you need a day off every now and then, and it's okay to have a day off. And that is coming from someone who is an absolute workaholic. I live to work and work to live. Wow. And while that was great in my younger years, in my 20s and my 30s, in my 40s, I'm starting to realize that, you do need to stop and take breaks. And so I did actually take a vacation last year and this year. Wow. Very, very rare for me.
Good.
But it helped reset things and it helped reset focus. And it's just amazing what it can do for your mind and body. So don't be afraid to take time off and recharge those batteries.
I feel as though there's this generational misunderstanding about work-life balance out there. Is that still out there? I feel like we talked recently where you have 20-year-olds working in the workplace with 60-year-olds. And of course, things were different back when that 60-year-old was 20 and the way they worked. What conversations do you have out there like that? And do you hear kids like me, the 23-year-olds, thinking that we deserve more off time? I'm hearing it all throughout my community, at least.
So yes, and we have talked about that in the past when we've talked about generations and how they kind of prioritize things. And so one of the interesting things that we talked about during this health summit was the employees that are currently in the medical professions, in the social work, in the policing professions, who are starting to get burnout. And they are closer to my age, which is that early 40s. So a lot different than your age, right? My parents came from the generation where the harder you worked showed how much you cared. And so to take time off meant you didn't care about your work. And so for people in my generation, that's kind of ingrained in us. But at the same time, we also go, man, we don't want to be like our parents and just working nonstop and never having a life, right? Yeah. And then we get to your generation, and your generation is now, 2 generations past that kind of mentality where you can see much more clearer and you don't feel that drive and that urgency to go nonstop. And so we can definitely all learn something from each other. But understanding that, it is okay to take time off, even if you are in the older generations, it's okay. Yeah. It's going to help in the long run. And it's something that the younger generations have learned quickly, and man, I wish I would have learned that as quickly as they have.
Yeah, it's definitely going to help reduce that burnout, and we'll see where the movement happens in generations to come here. But Valerie, we are in our last minute here. Can you work in just a few more ways to reduce burnout in the workplace there?
So, you know what, as a manager, make sure that you are monitoring the workloads and scheduling of your employees. That can be incredibly important. Make sure that you are enforcing training that will help them through issues like this. And it's so incredibly important to give them the tools. And if you are looking for tools, looking for trainings, looking for programs, please reach out to U of I Extension. We definitely have trainings and programs of all different types that we can come and offer your employees to make sure that we are preventing burnout.
Absolutely. Valerie Belusco, ready to help out any community, any organization that's looking to push that. And Valerie, thank you so much for taking the time being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Valerie Belusco, Community and Economic Development Educator with the University of Illinois Extension. This has been the WTIM Morning Show.
The Big 870 WTIM Assumption Taylorville, 96.1 W241 CF Taylorville, 107.5 W298 CD Shelbyville, 107.9 W.